After exposing and firing a toxic manager on her very first day, CEO Maya Reynolds was determined to rebuild Sterling Enterprises, a leading technology consulting firm, into a workplace of fairness and integrity. She envisioned a company where employees could thrive, free from fear, favoritism, and discrimination. However, what she initially thought was a single bad actor turned out to be a deeply entrenched culture of corruption and complacency that ran far deeper than she had imagined. As she walked through the halls of her company in the days following Jessica Monroe's termination, Maya began to notice the subtle signs of systemic problems: whispers in the break room, nervous glances from employees, and an unmistakable air of tension. The deeper she dug, the more she uncovered: policies that were ignored, promotions that were handed out based on personal connections rather than merit, and a management team that had long prioritized their own interests over the well-being of the employees. Despite the resistance she faced, Maya remained steadfast in her mission. She knew that if she was to truly make a difference, she couldn't stop at just one firing. She had to root out the underlying structures that enabled toxicity to thrive. She was prepared for a fight, but she had no idea just how much opposition she would face from those who had long benefited from the status quo. Maya stood in front of a meeting room, addressing a group of stern-faced executives. She spoke with confidence and firmness, emphasizing the need for change. She outlined the toxic behaviors that had long been tolerated within the company: favoritism, discrimination, and unethical practices that were actively harming the business and its employees. Her voice was steady, her words deliberate, as she made it clear that the time for complacency was over. She detailed her vision for a company that valued fairness and opportunity, where promotions were based on merit rather than personal relationships, and where every employee, regardless of background, had an equal chance to succeed. But as she spoke, she noticed some executives exchanging glances, their expressions shifting from indifference to subtle defiance. Some whispered among themselves, clearly skeptical or even outright resistant to her new direction. Richard Lawson, the VP of Operations, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his smirk barely hidden. Diane Turner, the CFO, let out a quiet scoff, shaking her head as if dismissing Maya's idealism as naivety. Mark Benson, the head of HR, gave a pointed glance to a few of his closest allies, as if signaling that they needed to take action. The tension in the room was palpable, and Maya knew that while some executives might support her, others had no intention of allowing her changes to take effect without a fight. Undeterred, Maya maintained her composure. "This is not just a suggestion," she continued, her voice unwavering. "This is the new standard, and anyone who refuses to uphold these principles will find that there is no longer a place for them here." She let her words hang in the air, watching as the resistance among certain executives hardened while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. She knew she had just declared war on the corrupt power structure that had governed the company for years, and she was prepared for whatever came next. Behind closed doors, a group of senior executives conspired against Maya, their frustration and paranoia mounting with each passing day. Richard Lawson, VP of Operations, scoffed at the changes, fearing the loss of his influence and the unchecked control he had enjoyed over departmental affairs. "She's trying to uproot everything we built," he sneered, slamming a report onto the conference table. "And for what? To make everyone equal? That's not how business works." Diane Turner, the CFO, let out a quiet smirk, waving a dismissive hand. "She's young and naive. She thinks she can march in here and flip the system overnight. But she's just one person. We've been here longer, and we know how this company truly runs. We just need to let her believe she's winning before we remind her where the real power lies." Mark Benson, the head of HR and a former ally of Jessica Monroe, leaned forward, his tone hushed but sharp. "We have to be smart about this. Direct resistance will only make her double down. But if we make her look incompetent, if we stir up enough uncertainty, she'll lose employee support before she even realizes what's happening." With that, the sabotage began. First, an anonymous email circulated through the company, spreading the idea that Maya's reforms would lead to massive layoffs. The whispers in the break room grew louder, uncertainty creeping into conversations between employees. Then, crucial budget approvals mysteriously stalled, strangling her new diversity and inclusion programs before they could take root. HR suddenly became inefficient, conveniently losing complaints against key executives while amplifying minor infractions of Maya's supporters. As tensions escalated, key client deals started slipping away. Accidental miscommunications led to missed deadlines and strained partnerships. Loyal employees who had supported Maya's vision began feeling demoralized, unsure whether her leadership would truly bring the positive change they had hoped for. Every attempt she made to push forward was met with invisible resistance, a coordinated effort designed to exhaust her, to make her doubt herself, and ultimately, to break her authority from within. Maya could feel the undercurrents shifting, and she knew she had to act before it was too late. The sabotage began swiftly and escalated with alarming speed. Budget cuts suddenly appeared in Maya's diversity and inclusion initiatives, with previously approved funds mysteriously being reallocated to other projects favored by the senior executives. When Maya inquired about the missing resources, she was met with vague explanations and bureaucratic red tape, making it nearly impossible to track where the money had gone. At the same time, false rumors about impending layoffs spread like wildfire. Employees whispered in hushed tones about secret plans to downsize the workforce, with some claiming they had overheard senior executives discussing mass terminations. The fear was palpable, creating a growing sense of unease that further divided the staff. Morale plummeted, and productivity began to decline as workers started focusing more on protecting themselves rather than contributing to the company's goals. HR, once a department meant to protect employees, had suddenly become a black hole for complaints. Those who tried to report workplace misconduct found their concerns dismissed or lost in the system. Employees who spoke out in support of Maya's initiatives found themselves subtly punished, receiving harsher performance reviews, being excluded from key meetings, or even being reassigned to less favorable roles. The message was clear. Challenging the old system came with consequences. Perhaps the most damaging act of sabotage was the mysterious collapse of a critical client deal. A high-profile partnership that had been months in the making suddenly fell apart due to an accidental miscommunication. Key documents had gone missing, deadlines were inexplicably missed, and emails confirming agreements were mysteriously deleted. The financial damage was substantial, and the incident shook the confidence of Maya's allies within the company. Suspicious of these developments, Maya began reviewing company records late into the night, meticulously piecing together the puzzle. She started tracking inconsistencies, cross-referencing emails, and even discreetly speaking with employees who had witnessed suspicious behavior. As the evidence mounted, a pattern became undeniable. All roadblocks traced directly back to Richard, Diane, and Mark. They weren't just resisting change. They were actively working to dismantle everything she was trying to build. It was a coup, and if she didn't act quickly, they would succeed in forcing her out before she could fully execute her vision. Realizing the depth of corruption, Maya sought the help of Michael and Sophia. They worked together, combing through documents, tracking inconsistencies in financial records, and compiling testimonies from employees who had witnessed the misconduct firsthand. The deeper they dug, the more they found. Unauthorized budget reallocations, emails detailing secret plans to undermine Maya's policies, and even records of executives manipulating performance reviews to push out employees who supported change. The evidence was damning, but Maya knew she needed more than just proof. She needed the right moment to strike. For 2 weeks, they continued their investigation in secret, working late into the night, careful not to alert Richard, Diane, and Mark. Maya even planted a false rumor about her stepping down due to internal pressures, which made the corrupt executives grow more complacent, believing they had successfully backed her into a corner. But little did they know, Maya was preparing for the moment that would turn the tide against them. Finally, During a highly anticipated board meeting where the executives expected to solidify their control, Maya made her move. As the meeting began, she stood up, holding a thick folder in her hands. She remained calm, her expression unreadable, as she systematically revealed the evidence she had gathered. One by one, she exposed the fraud, corruption, and deliberate sabotage, displaying incriminating emails, financial documents, and recorded conversations for all to see. Gasps filled the room as the weight of her revelations sank in. The executives who had conspired against her shifted uncomfortably, their faces drained of color as they realized the extent of what had just been revealed. Richard opened his mouth to argue, but Maya was one step ahead. She turned to the legal team, who had been briefed in advance, and motioned for them to proceed. The company's policies were clear. Anyone caught in deliberate sabotage and unethical conduct will be terminated immediately. With a firm voice, Maya declared that Sterling Enterprises would no longer be a playground for power-hungry executives, citing major corporate scandals like the Wells Fargo fraud case and the Enron collapse as examples of what happens when unchecked corruption festers in leadership. Accountability isn't just a buzzword, it's a necessity. We've seen what happens when companies put profits over ethics, and I refuse to let Sterling Enterprises become another cautionary tale, she stated firmly, reinforcing her commitment to ethical leadership and corporate transparency. Effective immediately, Richard, Diane, and Mark were fired. Security officers stepped into the room, ready to escort them out as the entire boardroom watched in stunned silence. Employees who had suffered under their corruption exchanged relieved glances, some even holding back smiles. The toxic reign was over, and justice had finally been served. With a firm voice, Maya announced that Sterling Enterprises would no longer be a playground for power-hungry executives. Effective immediately, Richard, Diane, and Mark were fired. Security officers stepped into the boardroom, their presence a stark reminder of the authority Maya now wielded. As they approached, Richard turned red with fury, slamming his fists onto the table. "This is ridiculous. You can't do this," he bellowed, his voice echoing across the silent room. Diane, usually composed and smug, faltered, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. "You're making a mistake," she hissed, her eyes darting to the other executives for support, but none came. The tides had shifted, and the people she once controlled now watched her downfall with quiet satisfaction. Mark, ever the manipulator, tried one last ploy, standing up and straightening his tie as if he could negotiate his way out. "Maya, let's be reasonable," he began, forcing a composed tone. "I've been with this company for years. I know how things work. You don't want to make a rash decision that could lead to unnecessary lawsuits or damage to the company's reputation. Maybe we can come to an agreement, perhaps a severance package, a smooth transition." Maya recognized the tactic instantly, a classic corporate maneuver often used by executives to soften their downfall. A golden parachute, a quiet exit with a hefty payout, a way to escape consequences while still profiting from wrongdoing. She wasn't going to let that happen. "Maya, let's be reasonable. We can fix this together. You don't want to divide the company any further. The division was created the moment you chose corruption over integrity," Maya interrupted, her voice unwavering. "Your actions have hurt countless employees, and I will not allow this company to be ruled by deceit any longer." Security firmly guided the disgraced executives toward the exit, their protests turning to stunned silence as they realized there was no escaping accountability. As they disappeared from view, the tension that had hung over the office for years seemed to lift. Employees exchanged looks, some of shock, others of immense relief. Michael and Sophia, who had once been victims of the toxic regime, shared a glance, their expressions filled with hope. The room erupted into hushed murmurs, then applause. The employees who had suffered under Richard, Diane, and Mark's rule knew that a new era had begun. For the first time in years, they felt seen. They felt valued. And most importantly, they believed in the future of Sterling Enterprises once again. 1 month later, the office environment had transformed in ways that once seemed impossible. Employees, who had previously worked in fear of retaliation, now spoke openly in meetings, freely sharing ideas without the anxiety of being silenced or dismissed. HR, once a stronghold of corruption, had been restructured from the ground up, implementing fair policies that prioritized employee well-being over executive favoritism. New policies were aligned with U.S. workplace laws, such as the Equal Pay Act and Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, ensuring that hiring, promotions, and workplace protections were handled with transparency and accountability. Maya also introduced strict anti-retaliation measures and whistleblower protections, empowering employees to report misconduct without fear of repercussions. The company's HR department became a model of compliance and fairness, shifting from a tool of the executives to a resource that genuinely supported employees. New initiatives were launched to ensure transparency in promotions, equal pay, and workplace inclusivity, allowing employees to see that Maya's leadership was not just about words. It was about action. As Maya walked through the office, she could see the difference in her team. Conversations were no longer whispered in hushed tones. Instead, discussions flourished and collaboration thrived. Even longtime employees, who had resigned themselves to the company's toxic past, were now re-engaged, eager to contribute to the vision Maya had fought so hard to implement. She had dismantled a system that had, for too long, prioritized power over people and replaced it with one that valued integrity, fairness, and real leadership. Standing by her office window, gazing out at the city skyline, Maya allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She had faced resistance, sabotage, and the full force of those who had sought to protect their positions at the expense of others. But in the end, change had prevailed. The company she had inherited was no longer a place of intimidation and fear, but a workplace where employees could finally see a future worth believing in. Through the implementation of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and robust whistleblower protections, Maya ensured that every employee had a voice and a clear path to advancement based on merit. These reforms not only rebuilt trust, but also set a new industry standard for ethical corporate leadership. A final thought settled in her mind. Real leaders don't just expose problems, they fix them. And as she turned away from the window, the determination in her eyes made one thing clear. This was only the beginning. Will you stand up for change? Have you ever faced a toxic workplace? Share your story in the comments. Subscribe to Toch Story today for more inspiring real-world stories. Like and share to spread awareness about workplace justice. Lessons and meaningful message from Maya's story. Maya Reynolds' journey in transforming Sterling Enterprises is more than just a story about corporate justice. It is a powerful lesson in leadership, integrity, and the courage to stand against systemic corruption. Her determination to challenge the status quo and bring fairness to the workplace exemplifies the kind of bold action required to make lasting change. Beyond being a corporate reform story, Maya's experience serves as a broader metaphor for the power of persistence, ethical leadership, and the resilience required to stand against deeply ingrained injustice. It highlights the importance of individuals who are willing to take risks, endure opposition, and challenge the norms to create a more just and equitable environment. Maya's fight was not just about fixing policies or removing bad actors. It was about shifting a mindset, changing a culture, and inspiring others to take responsibility for their own workplaces. Her journey demonstrates that creating meaningful change often requires enduring hardship, facing resistance, and never backing down in the face of adversity. The lessons from Maya's story go beyond the walls of a corporate office. They apply to every workplace, every organization, and every individual who believes in making things better. Whether it's in leadership, activism, or day-to-day interactions, her actions remind us that real change starts with one person willing to take a stand. 1. Leadership is about action, not just a title. Maya did not simply take a position of power and maintain the status quo. She actively fought for meaningful change, proving that true leadership requires effort, accountability, and the willingness to make difficult decisions. She faced resistance at every turn, yet she remained steadfast, refusing to allow fear or intimidation to dictate her actions. Her leadership was not just about enforcing policies, but about setting a new cultural standard, one that valued transparency, fairness, and ethical responsibility. She took the time to understand the concerns of employees, made difficult decisions that put integrity over convenience, and stood firm against those who attempted to undermine progress. Maya's actions also demonstrated that leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room or making empty promises. It's about leading by example, standing firm in moments of crisis, and making choices that benefit the greater good, even when they come at personal or professional risk. Lesson: being in charge is not enough. It's what you do with your influence that defines your legacy. True leadership requires resilience, the ability to challenge entrenched systems, and the courage to make hard but necessary choices. 2. Corruption thrives in silence. The toxic culture at Sterling Enterprises had been allowed to fester because no one challenged it. Employees feared retaliation, believing that speaking up would lead to being ostracized, demoted, or even fired. Over time, this silence became the norm, allowing unethical behavior to flourish without consequence. Those in power relied on this fear, knowing that as long as no one spoke out, they could continue their misconduct without accountability. However, silence does not eliminate corruption, it empowers it. Maya understood this and chose to take a stand. By exposing the injustices happening within the company, she shattered the illusion that speaking out was futile. She showed employees that their voices mattered, that change was possible, and that no leader should be beyond reproach. This story reflects a broader truth in workplaces and institutions everywhere. Corruption does not persist because it is inevitable, but because people allow it to. The moment individuals begin to challenge the status quo and demand accountability, the walls of corruption begin to crack. Lesson: if you see wrongdoing, speak up. Corruption only thrives when people accept it as unchangeable. Every voice matters, and even one person taking a stand can inspire a movement toward justice and accountability. 3. Integrity comes at a cost, but it's worth it. Maya faced sabotage, manipulation, and deceit, all because she stood for what was right. She encountered relentless opposition, from whispers behind closed doors to overt attempts at undermining her credibility. The higher she climbed in her fight for justice, the stronger the resistance became. Yet, despite the relentless obstacles, she refused to bend under pressure. The road to integrity is often lonely. Many people choose the path of least resistance, fearing the consequences of challenging corrupt systems. Maya, however, understood that real change never comes without struggle. She endured smear campaigns, deliberate attempts to isolate her from allies, and financial threats that could have deterred anyone with less resolve. But instead of retreating, she used these experiences to fuel her determination. Her resilience sent a powerful message to those around her. Employees who had once been afraid to speak up began finding their voices. Those who had quietly accepted unfair treatment started to question their circumstances. Maya's unwavering integrity did more than change company policies. It changed an entire culture, proving that one person's steadfast commitment to fairness can create a lasting impact. Lesson: doing the right thing is never easy, but it is always necessary. Integrity is a long-term investment in a better future. It requires patience, resilience, and the courage to face opposition. But in the end, it builds something far greater than temporary success. It builds trust, credibility, and a legacy of justice. 4. Workplace fairness benefits everyone. By implementing fair policies, restructuring HR, and prioritizing diversity, Maya not only improved employee morale, but also made the company more successful. Employees who once felt undervalued and unheard now had opportunities for advancement based on merit rather than favoritism. The company's retention rates improved, as workers who previously considered leaving due to toxic leadership found renewed motivation and trust in the organization. Workplace fairness also led to tangible business improvements. Collaboration increased, as employees felt safe sharing ideas without fear of discrimination or dismissal. Productivity soared, as teams worked with greater enthusiasm and commitment, knowing that their contributions were genuinely valued. Sterling Enterprises became a case study in how fostering an inclusive, ethical workplace isn't just about compliance. It's about creating an environment where employees thrive and the company prospers. By championing equity and inclusivity, Maya ensured that fairness wasn't just a corporate slogan, but an everyday reality. She introduced mentorship programs to support underrepresented employees, implemented anonymous reporting systems to prevent retaliation, and worked with HR to enforce unbiased hiring and promotion policies. These changes didn't just make the workplace more ethical, they made it more competitive, more resilient, and ultimately, more profitable. Lesson: a culture of fairness and inclusion leads to better outcomes for individuals and organizations alike. When employees feel valued and protected, they become more engaged, innovative, and dedicated to the company's success. A fair workplace isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. 5. Real change starts with one person. Maya was just one person, but her actions created a ripple effect that changed the entire company. Initially, many employees doubted that change was possible. They had seen others try and fail, their voices drowned out by the weight of corporate politics and entrenched power structures. Yet, Maya proved that one person's determination, when backed by action and persistence, could dismantle a toxic system and replace it with something better. Her courage became contagious. Employees who had once remained silent found the strength to speak up. Those who had accepted injustice as an unfortunate reality began to challenge it. Small acts of resistance turned into larger movements within the company. Employees standing together to demand accountability, ensuring that fairness and integrity remained the foundation of their workplace. Maya's actions also showed that leadership isn't just about formal authority. Real leaders emerge when someone is willing to act decisively, even when it's risky or unpopular. By holding corrupt executives accountable and implementing meaningful reforms, she didn't just improve Sterling Enterprises, she inspired a shift in how employees viewed their role within the company. They were no longer passive participants, but active advocates for a better workplace. Lesson: never underestimate the impact of one voice. One person's choice to stand for what's right can ignite a movement, empower others to take action, and set lasting change in motion. The question isn't whether change is possible. It's whether you're willing to be the one who starts it. Maya's story is a wake-up call to all of us, whether you're an employee experiencing workplace discrimination, a leader aiming to improve your organization, or someone simply trying to do the right thing. Change starts with you. Have you ever faced injustice at work? Share your story in the comments below. Want more inspiring content? Subscribe to Toch Story today to hear more powerful stories that matter. Help spread awareness. Like and share this story so more people can learn the importance of workplace justice. Real leaders don't just expose problems, they fix them. Will you be part of the change?